special meeting publication. On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, ayes have it. Ordered. Fourth order of business is public comment on agenda items only. If there's agendas up in front, if you got a chance to look at them, just on the agenda items. If there's any comments. And if there's no comments, we will go to fifth order of business. Fifth order of business is the administration committee. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a motion to adopt the resolution as prepared, authorizing the issuance of a federally taxable tax and revenue anticipation note, series of 2012, in the principal amount of $2,558,341.72, and that Stevens and Lee, a professional corporation, is hereby appointed bond counsel in connection with the issuance and sale of the note.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the question.
On the question, is there a timeline on this?
Savino? Is there a timeline on it?
Well, how we got here today is that congressmen and FEMA officials and FEMA officials and state officials have brought this as a means to expedite money that FEMA has not released to the borough of West Pittston concerning the flood debris removal as a result of Tropical Storm Lee. There was assurances today that we would have something from FEMA, that it was submitted for congressional approval, and that did not happen. It did not happen. It still hasn't been submitted for congressional approval, and this is a means here, these two actions under fifth order, items A and B, to facilitate a loan from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to the borough in anticipation that the borough receives the funds from FEMA. Item 5A, the resolution that's before the council now and on the floor, is in the form of a TRAN, which is a Tax Revenue Anticipation Note. The requirements under the Local Unit Government Debt Act requires that this loan be paid back to PennDOT on or before December 31st of 2012. Failure to do that, and failure for the borough to receive the funds from FEMA by on or before December 31st, 2012, will put the borough in default of the TRAN and then place the borough in debt for 2013 in the form of a general obligation note that the borough would have to budget that $2,558,341.72 in its budget and shown to be repaid. So that will fall back on the taxpayers of West Pittston Borough, and for the borough to come up with the funds to pay that if those FEMA funds are not. And again, just to go back to what I said earlier, as of today, September 20th, FEMA has not sent that for congressional approval.
So
today here is, and just so everybody knows, congressional approval, they're saying from the time they receive it could take anywhere from 3 weeks to 4 months. And the reason it needs to go for congressional approval is many factors. The main factor is anything over $1 million has to receive congressional approval. So the first step in the process would be that in order to achieve this, if by December 31st of this year, that's why we're here today, because if it's going to take anywhere from 3 weeks to 4 months to receive the money, the borough needs to hope that we're going to have that money received by December 31st or be in default of the note. And there's many factors that lead as to what has to happen. First process is that FEMA has to submit it to the federal budget office From the Federal Budget Office, it has to go to the Congressional Committee. From the Congressional Committee, it has to go to the Office of Homeland Security, and then from the Office of Homeland Security, it goes back to Congressional Committee for approval. Some of the things that the gambling points are is that FEMA is saying that they're done with their review. They're saying that the $2,558,341.72 is deemed as eligible costs, but they can't guarantee that the congressional approval is going to be for that amount. Congressional approval, they can say that they deem the eligible cost to be $1.5 million. So there's a lot of factors here that put the borough in the ability to pay this, if that was to happen. An example would being if it's 2.5 and the congressional approval is only for 1.5, the borough's on the hook for $1 million.
The motion on the floor and the second was for the adoption of the resolution.
Correct.
For it to be prepared.
As prepared.
Did that answer your question about the date, December 31st?
Well, yes, he did. December 31st is a deadline for the loan itself.
Correct.
Okay, this is just for the resolution.
Correct.
But you did touch on a point that if we adopt the resolution and adopt the loan, and the funds are not received by West Pittston by December the 31st, we're in default of that loan, correct?
Correct, dependent, right.
Okay.
The loan is overdue to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation because it is in the form of a tax revenue anticipation.
Right. Now, at the same time, you said that 2.558 million would have to be budgeted in 2013.
If the loan were not repaid.
If the loan was not repaid.
Right.
By
So
December.
what's our
31st.
annual budget? in town
Annual
of West-
budget is approximately about $1.65 million.
So $1.65 million, and we're supposed to budget $2.5 million.
We have to show that as a debt to be paid and to show the revenues to pay that debt.
Okay. Thank you.
No question. All right. This is a very difficult situation, and it's most difficult not just for people sitting up here, but for the contractors who did a fantastic job cleaning up the town in the days and weeks that followed the flood. Pioneer Construction did a fabulous job, professional job, and it was a monumental task, as everybody can recall. Probably had enough to fill half a landfill by the time it got said and done. So, I understand, here we are a year later, and these guys haven't been paid. That's a tough situation, and certainly their financial hardships are to be had because of that by everybody. The thing that concerns me, though, with all of this is the December 31st deadline. And I understand because it's a tran, it's required by law to be paid back in the same calendar year that the revenues are collected in. So it has to be December 31st. Given the track record of the federal government's processes and the timelines of their processes, I'm not overly confident that this is going to be expedited through in the next 2 or 3 months by the federal agencies. One, it's a presidential election year. There's probably a lot of other priorities on minds in Washington. Two, the federal budget, as we all know, the federal government is $16 trillion in debt, and they're running massive deficits in their own budget. So I don't know what Congress is going to say, or the new Congress come January 1st, or the ones running for office now. I don't know if they're going to approve this or not. What I am concerned about are the residents of West Pittston, because I'm a councilman as you guys are up here, and we're sworn to protect their interest, and we're the stewards of the financial status of West Pittston. So I'm concerned. I would never ever want something to go wrong here, and put this kind of debt on the backs of the residents of West Pittston. That's the last thing on earth, in light of everything they've suffered from this epic disaster. I wouldn't want that to happen, so I'm not so sure what the cure is here for this situation. But I'm scared to death if this funding didn't come through by December 31st, what we would do other than go bankrupt as a town because of the disaster. And I'm torn. I really am.
Thank you for your comments. I also share a lot of them, a lot of the same opinions and concerns. But we have an opportunity to at least try and get some financial assistance before this, before the federal government does give us our money. I guess at this time, if there are no more questions, I am going to ask for a roll call vote, please. On the resolution, right now, only.
Mr. Albano?
Yes.
Mr. Stankus?
Yes.
Mr. Hood?
Yes.
Mr. Rose?
No.
Mr. Thornton?
No.
Mr. Mazinski?
No.
President Hosier?
Yes. If my
Motion passes.
motion passes 4-3.
I have a motion to adopt a resolution as prepared, authorizing West Pittston Borough to enter into an infrastructure bank loan agreement as prepared with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Transportation in an amount of $2,558,341.72 at an interest rate of 0% for emergency flood debris removal and disposal.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. On the question?
Just one thing on the question. I did a quick rudimentary calculation. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I voted against the first resolution. I'm hoping I'm dead wrong and FEMA gives us this money in the next 2 months, or a month, or a week. That would be ideal. Everybody gets paid and it's over with. But if I'm right and it doesn't happen the way we hope it happens, or hope it would happen, I just did a quick calculation. If we had to raise that money quickly on our own with the residents of West Pittston, there's roughly 2,300 homes in West Pittston. That would mean an assessment of an additional $1,000 tax on every home to raise that money. And I just think, that would be a disaster for many people. So that's roughly the math to cover, 2.6 million. That's all.
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. President, just to follow Mr. Thornton's comments, the other factor that needs to be recognized here by everybody too is that the borough may not be eligible to borrow that amount of money due to the borrowing. Our borrowing with them, it may be exceeded. So that's another thing that could throw a wrench into the whole thing is that we may not even be able to borrow that money. As you know, for the sewer project, we have a debt out there for 20 or 30 years on a sewer project that we just undertook. So when the borrowing base certificates are all done, and if we need to get to that point where we have to borrow, we just better keep our fingers crossed that this will not exceed our borrowing limits. Because under the Local Government Unit Debt Act, every municipality has a borrowing limit to borrow funds. So that's all I have, Mr. President.
The only comment that I have as president is, yes, we have to keep the residents of West Pittston in the back of our minds for everything we do. A $2.55 million loan would just do us in right now. We don't have the money. But at the same time, I think we need, my feeling is that we got to look into it and see how far we can go. And again, the state is willing, and if we could keep some pressure on FEMA, which some of them in the room know that we've kept pressure on them and they don't seem to listen to us. But keep the pressure on them and see what we can do for that 3-month period.
Well, my comment is that the residents should be in the front of our minds. And I'm a gambling man, but this is a huge, huge risk. And if this funding doesn't come through, we're bankrupt. The state might be willing, but they put a deadline on it. And that deadline is December 31st. And if it's not paid, West Pittston is bankrupt. That's all I have to say.
It's not PennDOT to put the deadline as of December 31st.
It's illegal.
It's the form of the TRAN that requires the deadline to be December 31st, 2012, which is DCED.
Well, it's actually the local unit
Government Debt Act, right. through DCED.
requires that the money be repaid in the same year in which it is.
You're right, exactly.
Excuse me, Mark, is it possible to ask for an executive session at this time?
If it involves matters that are properly within an executive session.
Yes, absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
At this time, we're going to go into executive session. We will be.
You do need a
you
motion.
you need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to.
I second it.
Understand that you probably have a very large bill outstanding.
2.5 million and change. And it's not all my bill, it's the contractor sitting here. I was hired by Tony Dinesco, the mayor, in September 10th of last year to come down and help them with their flood. They already had a good quantity of these contractors working for them. They asked me to come in and overlook the project. So, I went in and took the task. And what we're in right now is we have contractors with large bills, some of them excess of 400,000, and they're not very big companies, and they're in trouble. And I mean, I understand for the folks of West Pittston also, but I mean, we did our due diligence. We paid the interest and on this for a year, and now someone else has to take the burden because it's just, you know, you're asking 900 people to take the burden of 15 contractors. It's pretty tough.
You guys have been holding the bag now for almost a year. And
A year to date.
Year to date.
Yeah.
And what has that meant for some of these companies? I mean, from
They're
day
struggling.
From day to day.
The economy is struggling, but can you imagine having that burden on you? That's what everyone was facing. We need to get it settled.
And you guys jumped right in, not thinking
Immediately.
Not thinking twice.
We had 91 men between all companies for 17 hours for 3 weeks straight in this town, paying them off. And then once the National Guard lifted the restriction, we went 24 hours. So, I mean, we were working with the National Guard, and it's, like I said, I understand and feel for everybody, but I mean, we have our own lives and our own families and people to take care of. Like I said, you're talking 15 contractors versus a town of 900 people. And that's how many houses were affected here. This was mass chaos when we got here. There was sewage, oil, everything in it these folks had to work in. So that's, we're hoping they make the right decision here.
And it looks like the first
You know.
part of that passed very narrowly, but it still passed.
Yeah.
And that would have the loan be funneled in from PennDOT.
Yeah.
And I'm not to put anybody on the spot, but looking at this from a realistic standpoint, how close is it for some of you guys as far as the difference between, you know, really financially going under?
I can't answer that for them. I get a lot of calls, and that's their own business. But you just look at the struggling economy the way it is right now. It's a no-brainer that, you know, work is tough out there. So,
Has there been any, you know, have you had any confrontations with leaders here about how dire the situation is? I mean,
Yes.
do they understand that you're?
yes, they understand. I'm not going to say that they're passing the buck. It's just that, you know, like they explain here, they're looking out for the citizens, but we have to look out for our livelihood too, because, you know, we jumped in and did our due diligence. It's time for them to do theirs. That's what we feel.
What would you say to them if it happened again? If the water came up tomorrow, would you be here?
You know what?
What do you think?
No.
Never,
No,
never.
no.
Nope.
I mean, when somebody sticks.
And it's not fair to the people, because I really don't think, them folks out there in that town when we were up, before we were even hired, we gave them stuff, and then they're good people. I mean, I don't know if they know exactly what's going on here. I mean, because our men, they worked hand in hand, everyone got in the houses with the older folks, helped them out, and this was on their own time. You know, I mean, until we were actually hired, and then after hours, the men would come back and help these folks. So I don't think it's, I'm not blaming the people out there, so.
Joe, you asked a question about, would you do it again? If you had somebody who you provided a service for and it took this long to make good on your payment, and you're not talking $2.55 million, you're maybe talking 1,000, a couple of thousand at most, you would have taken them to court by now, right?
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Long time
That's why I
ago.
said we did our due diligence of
You know,
eating
it's
this.
supposed to be get paid in 4 months, and it's 5 months, and it's 6 months,
Yeah.
now it's a year, now it's gonna be a year, plus another 3 months, plus another 6 months, and I'd come and help the old people that needed help, but I would never work for the town again,
Can I
nothing.
come over and talk to you?
Nope.
Come on,
He's doing
dude.
fine there.
Yeah, he is.
Puts the camera,
I
puts
need,
the
I need
cameras
like
on.
one more. Would anybody else care to speak to me about this?
No, I'm good, I don't.
You
I
sure?
don't- yeah.
Okay.
I have a big mouth, but I don't like being on camera.
When was technically the last bit of work you guys did? I know you were working, we were here as well.
October 31st was the last day we were on.
Gotcha.
We got our first intermission with them. They had us run till October 5th, then we were extended again to the 20th, went on to there.
Call the meeting back to order, please. Executive session, we're back at 25 to 8. And we have a motion, we have a second. Any other comments on the question?
And just for the record, so that the record is very clear, we had an executive session during the time frame between the recess and the reconvening for litigation issues.
And no other questions, no other comments?
The motion was already seconded by Mr. Stankus.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please. Savina?
Mr. Albano?
Yes.
Mr. Stankus?
Yes.
Mr. Hood?
Yes.
Mr. Rose?
No.
Mr. Thornton?
No.
Mr. Bazinski?
No.
President Hosier?
Yes.
Record should reflect the motion carries 4-3.
Motion carried, 4-3.
That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any old business? Any new business to come before council tonight? Public participation. We'll open the floor for a few minutes for any questions or comments from the floor. Name, address.
Joe Valenti, 106 Exeter Avenue. My question is twofold. If the money doesn't come through or didn't come through, and it happened again tomorrow, which is a very good likelihood, considering what happened last year at this time, what would we do? How do we get contractors here if we can't get these guys paid?
Joe, I don't think anybody up here has that.
No, I just, I mean,
I understand
and it's a
the question.
double-edged sword because
And
I'm
that's-
on the hook too.
It is a double-edged sword, and it's a bigger problem for the people up here
Right.
and the emergency management people. And we're doing what we have to do. Again, as everybody stated, we're trying to keep everybody in mind. We're not doing this, just easy, dropping the bucket and just saying, well, what the heck, no, we're
No,
not.
right.
It's a big question.
My other question is the FEMA money contingent, is there any contingency on the FEMA money being delivered with what else is going on with FEMA and asking the
There is
town to
no-
come up to code.
To the best of our knowledge, it is a total separate issue. Two different divisions of
Okay.
FEMA.
Okay.
They have no,
They're not tied to one
no,
another.
they're not tied together at all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
You speak a little bit, Barry? Mike Cabbage from Pioneer. I said, fellows, you know, we came in on the request of the emergency management to do a good job here, and like you said, I felt that these men behind me did a real good job. I wasn't here alone, and most of these folks were hired before I got here, and I was asked to take over their paperwork for them. And we really appreciate getting this money to us, because like I said, we're a group of 15 contractors versus, 900 homes that we had to clean up. And like I said, nothing against the residents of West Pittston, we all feel for them. But it's just, we have our families and our companies, and there's some pretty rough situations out there right now with some of these companies. So we appreciate your thoughts.
And Mike, we totally understand.
Can I say something, Mr. President?
Sure.
And I, as emergency management and the mayor of West Pittston, I commend you. Believe me, when Brian Thornton and I spoke with you, Mike, we asked you two things. Did you ever work for FEMA? And you said yes. And the second thing is, we asked you could you wait for FEMA to get us the money? And you said yes. Nobody in their wildest dreams ever imagined that it was gonna take a year, and nobody knew. I asked you, and many times, anything over $1 million is a congressional investigation or a congressional dilemma, what they're calling it, approval. I never dreamed it, you never dreamed it, none of you guys knew it. I mean, our hands were tied. I appreciate what you did, and believe me, you did a yeoman's job. If we could have paid you, we would have did it a long time ago. And Mike can tell you, we've been battling with FEMA and PEMA and trying the best to help you out. What they voted on tonight, hopefully, will get us in the right direction, but I really appreciate what you did, and like I said, we did ask the questions, and if you knew about it and didn't say it to us, anything over $1 million, Mike, I never dreamed it, and I don't think any of these councilmen up here knew anything about it at all, so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the council and myself, what you did for West Pittston Borough. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
As being a person who was flooded, I want to thank you. And I appreciate what you guys did. You have no idea, and the fear that Joe brought up of what happens if it happens tomorrow is always in the back of our mind. Because what will we do with this borough if it happens again? Nobody anticipated a year. And nobody anticipated them coming back and saying, well, it's another 3 months before we get paid. I understand the no votes, and to be honest with you, it's such a roll of the dice, because we don't know where we're gonna end up 3 months from now. So that's all I have to say. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Has there been any research into other areas where you might go to get money?
Name, address.
Coach, we need your name, your full name and your.
Bill Yeoman,
Okay.
201 Montgomery Avenue,
Thank you, sir.
was not flooded.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Was there any other, did you do any research and find any other avenues besides FEMA to get money for this borough?
To pay the debris bill, that's what we're here for.
Just to get money?
We
Then
have
you can
been,
pay.
we have been countless different ways trying to get money to get for this borough from FEMA for many issues. And right now, tonight, we're here for this loan. That's why we're here, and that's why we had the special meeting. Any other questions?
I'm gonna get through this. Come hello, high water. I'm gonna get through this. If it's the last thing I know, I'm gonna stand my ground. I won't let them keep me down. Even if you've got to carry me